If your mind is the most dangerous superpower of all, what will you do? Save the world? Save your lover? Or save yourself? In Legion, David Haller shows us what it means to have such an overpowered ability. But unlike the typical Marvel story, this psychological roller coaster shows us how one can still be a hero, even if the reality you know can't be trusted. As we review Legion, make sure to question everything. From a young age, David Haller's mind is in chaos. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he eventually lands at Clockworks Psychiatric Hospital after failing to end it all. There, he meets the mysterious and beautiful Syd Barrett. However, she is firm about one thing: no touching. Despite this, David pursues her, and Syd even agrees to be in a relationship with him. But things go south when Syd says she'll be discharged. On the day she's scheduled to leave, David impulsively breaks Syd's no-touch rule and learns why Syd can't touch people. Their bodies switch because of that kiss. David finds himself inside Syd's body, and chaos soon erupts, forcing them apart. Everyone disappears, people screaming from rooms without doors, and, worst, David's friend, Lenny, is suddenly dead and fused to a wall. All of this apparently happened in the past. At present, David recounts his Clockworks history to Clark, a guy from some shady government group. Aware of David's powers, they are initially cautious, but that doesn't last long when David finally snaps and realizes he's powerful to the point that these guys are afraid of him. Threatened by David's overwhelming power, they knock him out. David soon wakes up bound and submerged in a pool with power cables. Just when it seems like he's cornered, Syd appears in his memory. After instructing David, she and a team of mutants rescue him from that facility. After the rescue, David wakes up in Summerland, overwhelmed by voices in his head. Summerland's leader, Melanie Bird, helps David realize he's not schizophrenic. Instead, he's a telepath, and those symptoms that he has are actually his powers. With her and the memory artist Ptonomy's help, David begins memory work to uncover the truth hidden in his past. They start with his childhood, where David relives tender moments with his parents. However, things soon get dark because of a disturbing bedtime story and a faceless father. The memory work sessions start to glitch, revealing a monstrous figure watching nearby. David begins to panic and Syd tries to comfort him, but this doesn't change the fact that she still can't bear to be touched. Aside from Melanie, Ptonomy, and Syd, Cary helps by placing David in the MRI to investigate his brain. During the scan, David somehow hears his sister's voice and realizes she's been taken by Division 3, the same shady government group that took him before. Terrified, David's powers surge and he's suddenly on the floor. At the same time, the MRI machine has been teleported outside. After things calm down, David wants to rescue his sister, Amy, but Syd convinces him to stay and learn how to control his abilities. To accelerate David's training, Melanie and Ptonomy dive deeper into David's memories, revealing his past telekinetic outburst. However, David's mind resists, and the devil with the yellow eyes reappears, terrifying only David. Unseen by the others, the session abruptly ends when David suddenly teleports themselves somewhere else within Summerland. Confused, David questions what's real. Syd becomes his emotional anchor, and the two grow closer. Later, Cary scans David's brain. Taunted by a vision of Lenny, David snaps. Syd quickly comes to his aid, but David accidentally projects himself and Syd into Division 3, where they see his sister Amy being held and tortured. Worse, a sinister mutant named Walter notices them before they disappear. After sharing this with them, Melanie warns David that rescuing Amy at that time is too risky. To break past the mental blocks, Melanie suggests a risky plan to sedate him during his memory work. Despite the danger, Syd insists on going with them. Inside David's mind, a young David accompanies them. As they go deeper, Syd recognizes the dangers unlike the other two. Syd gets separated as she chases after young David, and nightmarish figures stalk them. She and the others manage to escape, but David doesn't wake up, leaving him lost in his own mind. David's body is in Summerland, but his mind is trapped somewhere in the astral plane. While he's lost, Melanie sends Syd, Ptonomy, and Cary to investigate David's past. Along the way, they uncover disturbing details that point to David violently attacking his therapist and how his friend, Benny, has mysteriously been rewritten as Lenny. Back in Summerland, Melanie notices signs that her husband Oliver, who's been lost in the astral plane for years, might be waking up. Unknown to her, David encounters Oliver himself in the astral plane. Oliver tells David about his monster and how it cleverly makes him forget its existence. But then he corrects himself, calling it a parasite. In the real world, the investigation team tracks down David's old therapist, only to fall into Walter's trap. Cary takes on Division 3, while Syd body swaps with Walter to outsmart the enemy. Returning to the astral plane, David finds Lenny, who motivates him to use his powers by showing him the battle happening in the real world. This does the trick, and David returns to the real world to deal with Walter. However, he has no no idea that it is actually Syd. When Syd and Walter revert to their original form, Walter escapes after shooting Cary. They take Cary back to Summerland and Cary tends to her wounds. Cary absorbs her back into his body to help her heal. Meanwhile, David's powers are growing dangerously fast. He can now create his own mind space, the White Room, where he and Syd can finally touch without swapping bodies. This brings them closer to each other. After some time, David is still determined to save his sister. Despite Melanie's dissuasion, David storms Division 3 alone. With his advanced ability control, he effortlessly destroys Division 3. Syd, Melanie, Ptonomy, and Rudy arrive too late to stop him but find proof of David's destruction. Meanwhile, David brings his sister to their childhood home and confronts her. Lenny appears, her form shifting into the devil with the yellow eyes, and begins tormenting David and Amy, demanding a secret. There, David learns the truth that he's actually adopted. When Syd and the others arrive, they are shortly joined by Cary, who created a device that can isolate the entity in David's head. However, before they can put it on David, chaos occurs when Walter takes Rudy's form and shoots at David. At Syd's instruction, David pulls the two of them into their White Room, pausing time in reality. But David's parasite appears and he can't fight it. With time stopped, everyone is suddenly pulled into Clockworks psychiatric hospital and no one remembers why they're there. Everyone's now reshaped into a twisted version of Clockworks. Lenny becomes the therapist while the rest of them are patients. Though memories blur, Syd feels something's not right. She keeps remembering a bedroom door that no one else seems to notice. When Syd finally breaks through, remembering everything, she tries to act, but Lenny puts her to sleep. Meanwhile, Oliver's presence reappears. In the astral plane, he reaches out to Cary and Melanie, guiding them towards saving David and Syd. Noticing that some are out, Lenny entirely drops the act, takes full control, and traps David's true self. However, thanks to Cary, Syd wakes up from her slumber. Before we jump to the action, a flashback reveals that Oliver and Cary learns that David's parasite is actually a powerful mutant named Amahl Farouk, aka the Shadow King. So, to help the others, Cary uses Oliver's diving suit and gives Syd special glasses to help them see through the illusions. As for David, he remains trapped in his own mind, but his British accented rational self helps him face the truth. The parasite, Farooq, infected him as a baby and twisted his memories. Now rational, David tries to leave the nightmare created by his parasite. Meanwhile, a fight breaks out in Clockworks while Syd helps the others. Seeing this, Farooq, in Lenny form, ends Walter himself. But before Farooq can finish the others, Rudy holds him off. At that moment, David finally destroys the nightmare just as Cary places the metallic halo on David's head. Back in reality, the device isolates the Shadow King just as time resumes. David quickly catches bullets midair and teleports everyone to safety. With things now calm, Oliver wakes in his real body, but he's obviously missing some memories. But there are more things to worry about. Cary plans to remove Farooq from David's head. However, as they head to the lab, Clark appears with Division 3 agents. David easily neutralizes the agents, except for Clark, and offers peace. But before they can come to an agreement, the halo keeping Farooq at bay starts to fail. Soon, the Farooq extraction process begins. However, Farooq fights back, almost killing David. Determined, Syd saves him by body swapping. Chaos erupts as Farooq jumps from body to body, that is, until he gets into Oliver. Taking advantage of the confusion, he calmly leaves everyone behind. Later, at Summerland, Syd and David talk when a strange, small, flying orb appears. It scans David, traps him inside, and floats away while Syd can only helplessly watch. And Season 1 ends with our protagonist getting kidnapped. Season 2 continues a year after David disappears. Within that year, Summerland becomes a part of Division 3, with Admiral Fukuyama and his creepy Vermilion assistants in charge. In addition to Farooq, the Shadow King, they face the threat called the Catalyst. This mysterious virus freezes people, leaving them with chattering teeth. When Division 3 finally locates David, he wakes up confused. For him, only a single day has passed since that mysterious orb abducted him. With David claiming no memory of the past year, Cary places David in a sensory tank to recover his lost memories and find Farooq. While others try to help David, Syd worries he'll leave again. So David gifts her a compass that will always point to him. However, as they sleep, a creeping delusion in the form of a rotten chick crawls under the bed. Though David promises no secrets to Syd, he doesn't tell her that back when he got abducted, future Syd visited him inside the orb and gave him a terrifying mission, and that is to help Farooq find his body. Following future Syd's instruction, David helps Farooq, who's still in Oliver's body, with Lenny's consciousness. However, David clearly states that nobody gets hurt. With that, David, Syd, Ptonomy, and some agents go out to chase Farooq. But this is the diversion, so Farooq slips in Division 3 and eliminates several soldiers as he looks for the mysterious monk who knows where his real body is. However, Farooq doesn't find him. Considering the perfect timing, the Admiral begins suspecting David, and even David's not sure he did the right thing. To clear his head, David re-enters the psychic tank and contacts future Syd. She finally reveals how Farooq's death means a global plague will wipe out humanity. But if Farooq lives, he might stop it. However, David is still mad about what Farooq did. They end up clashing in the astral plane before finally agreeing to no more killing and finding the monk. Later, David finally admits everything to Syd. Despite David's betrayal, she decides to help him find the monk, who seems to be among those affected by the catalyst. Long ago, Farooq's body was buried by monks. Now, in the present, the mysterious monk, who knows where Farooq's body is, reappears. He escapes the catalyst-infected room, and apparently, he's the real source of the catalyst. Many people in the facility get infected, and things get weirder when a cow randomly appears amidst the psychic instability. David finds that only Cary remains free from the infection. Together, they enter the minds of Ptonomy and Melanie, who are trapped in mental loops. David rescues them while the cow continues to reappear. However, as David looks for Syd, the monk captures him and makes David experience how burying Farooq drove his entire order insane. After hacking into the Admiral's mind, the monk, who initially sees David as a potential weapon against the Shadow King, discovers that David is helping Farooq. The monk decisively ends the last line of their order without revealing where Farooq's body is. With the monk gone, David finds Syd infected by the catalyst. Without hesitating, he dives into her mind, desperate to save her. As the facility recovers from the attack, David and Syd remain unresponsive. Inside Syd's mind, David finds a blizzard and follows a trail of memories that reveals Syd's dark past. Initially misunderstanding her, David patiently relives these painful memories numerous times. David only finally understands when Syd tells him that love isn't enough to save them, and that pain is what makes them fight for it. Understanding the importance of enduring for love, the two finally wake up. However, in reality, Lenny is captured by Division 3, and she's literally alive. Lenny somehow gains a body and claims she's free from Farooq's control. Of course, no one believes this, and everyone wants to know how she is alive. To find out the truth, David enters her mind and witnesses how, during the previous attack in Division 3, Farooq stole a device that lets him bring Lenny back using Amy's body. Now, Amy is gone, while Lenny lives in Amy's body. Crushed by this overwhelming truth, David breaks down, wanting revenge. The weight of grief fractures David's mind, revealing alternate lives. In one life, he's homeless, alone, and ends up sliced by Cary's sword. In another, he's medicated, subdued, and cared for by Amy. Another version becomes a rich, dominant, and arrogant psychic under Farooq's influence. Then there's a hallucinating office worker, a junkie rambling about the multiverse, a suburban dad with kids, and a David who ends up dead after erasing the police. As all these lives pass by, we eventually return to the David who ends up in Clockworks Psychiatric Hospital. David's story flashes until it reaches the point where he mourns his sister. David forces himself to calm down and meets with Farooq in the astral plane. There, he swears vengeance. Soon after, Farooq seeks out future Syd and learns the truth that David causes the apocalypse. Teaming up with her, Farooq flips the script and claims he'll save the world. Meanwhile, Ptonomy gets infected by Farooq's mental parasite in the form of a rotten chick. And he's not the only one. Those infected soon charge at Admiral Fukuyama. They see him as a monster, but in reality, he's really just a guy. Clark nearly kills the Admiral, but David arrives just in time to purge the insanity. However, the parasite inside Ptonomy bursts out, becoming a grotesque insect. In the end, David crushes it like a bug. Meanwhile, Ptonomy is dying from what happened. So the Vermilion decides to upload his consciousness into their mainframe, keeping him alive in some form. Once there, Ptonomy discovers how the Admiral also hacked the monk's mind previously. Using his power, Ptonomy perceives that Farooq's body is in Le Désolé and relays this to David using one of the Vermilion. Meanwhile, Farooq visits the old caretaker who drove his body to its resting place. She agrees to help him in exchange for an endless dream. In Division 3, David secretly plans for a future only he seems to understand. He quietly enlists Lenny, Clark, and Cary by telepathically dropping cryptic images into their minds. This, of course, involves Lenny escaping from Division 3. With that covered, David heads to Le Désolé, where space and time warp. As for Syd, she's left behind with only a note, so she uses her compass to locate David. Once the couple reunites, they trek through the desert and find a haunting campsite to rest in for the night. Back at Division 3, Clark wakes up after receiving David's message. He prepares to leave, but Melanie, whom Farooq controls, knocks him out. But before we continue, let's flash back to how Melanie got to that point of betrayal. It is 13 days before the incident, and Melanie's grief and isolation made it easy to control her mind. She starts seeing visions of Oliver, except it's really Farooq who's luring her. While this unfolds, David's secret plan kicks off. Cary and Cary receive David's telepathic message. Following his instructions, they retrieve a strange weapon and leave it at the trunk of a car, which they park in a specific location. Meanwhile, Lenny sees Amy, who is still somehow alive inside her. Amy calls Lenny out and urges her to do what David instructed. Lenny listens and finds the car left behind by Cary and Cary. In an instant, it teleports her into the desert. Knowing she must wait, Lenny takes the weapon from the trunk before walking away. Back at Division 3, we now loop back to how Melanie knocks Clark out. Afterwards, Farooq rewards her by reuniting her with an illusion of Oliver. As the race to find Farouk's body continues, Syd wakes up to find a huge hole in the ground. A bait lures and pulls her within, and there she finds Melanie. Still controlled by Farooq, Melanie sows discord between the couple. With Syd missing, David storms into a mansion and captures Oliver. David beats him and even digs into Oliver's mind for answers, knowing that Farooq still controls Oliver. But David doesn't know that Syd sees this terrifying scene and falls for Melanie's words. Elsewhere, Lenny reaches the area with the weapon. Cary and Cary track Lenny's location, and they all face the monk attackers. Because of the fight, Cary gets taken underground. Cary follows while Lenny waits for her part with the sniper. Underground, Cary manages to escape his captor and finds David, while Cary goes down another path and finds Syd. Together, Cary and Syd fight the Minotaur that Farooq released. While everyone's busy, Farooq finally wakes in his body. In another location, Clark finally gets around to doing his task. With the Vermilion, they set up the choke. This psychic weapon can dampen mutants' powers, but Farooq sees through their plan and easily hurls it across the desert. With the choke far away, David and Farooq levitate into a full-on psychic brawl using monsters, machines, illusions, and even a moment where Farooq appears as Syd. This throws David off his game. Seeing this, Lenny decisively fires to activate the choke and give David an edge. Before the fight continues, we see Melanie and Oliver, who are now happily together in the frozen astral plane, and they hint at how David betrays Syd after the battle. Back in real time, David beats Farooq into the ground. However, Syd, who now doubts David, arrives with a gun. She accuses David of being no better than the villains they fight. Syd pulls the trigger, and Lenny shoots as well to deflect it. This throws both Syd and David to the ground. As Farooq gets captured by Division 3, David takes advantage of the commotion to alter Syd's memories. They soon return to the facility, but Syd's memory returns when Farooq sends in a mouse. So instead of Farooq, David goes on trial as Division 3 confronts him about how he might destroy the world. Faced with such judgment, David insists he deserves love. So he breaks free, teleports into Lenny's cell, and escapes with her. With that, the second season closes with Division 3 stunned. Season 3 begins with the new character, Jia Yi, later nicknamed Switch. After one surreal scavenger hunt, her journey leads her to meet David Holler. Unlike before, David now runs a commune. However, he still seeks to fix everything. So this is where Switch's ability comes in. Before David can speak of this, Switch uses her time travel ability a couple of times to save David from dying at the hands of Division 3. Convinced, David sees Switch as his ticket to fixing everything. While time traveling to save David again, Switch is suddenly pulled into an astral plane and is warned about David. However, Switch still chooses to help David anyway. Meanwhile, Farooq tells Division 3 about Switch's powers, so they launch another attack at the commune. But this time, before they can even get close, the entire house vanishes. David shares his time-traveling plan with Switch and plots how to stretch her abilities. He can't time travel himself, but he's confident they can pull it off with some psychic coaching and tech magic. Meanwhile, Division 3 captures one of David's followers and uses him to track the commune's location. The guy leads them straight to Lenny and a tea party, but of course she escapes again. And this time, she takes Cary with her. As for David, he psychically visits Syd, claiming he just wants peace. He tries to reason with her, but Syd's not buying it. Back at the commune's house, Lenny locks Cary up. He cunningly escapes the room, but runs straight into David. With his only goal in mind, David makes Cary more inclined to help them boost Switch's time travel powers. Soon, David's plan is set in motion. Now he aims to rewrite his entire past to save the future. In David's attempt to achieve his goal, the story moves to the past, showing how David's parents, Charles and Gabriel, met and got together. Like David and Syd, David's parents met in a mental hospital. Gabrielle suffers from her past while Charles is a telepath. As their relationship develops, Charles uses his ability to get them out of the hospital and live a normal life together. Aside from Charles's ability and ability amplifier, their life is relatively peaceful when David is born. However, this shifts when Charles heads to Morocco to search for another telepath like him. Gabrielle, now left alone with baby David, starts experiencing strange, dreamlike events and ghostly noises. Apparently, this is caused by David, who is trying to communicate with her to stop the Shadow King. In one horrifying night, Gabriel breaks down. Charles finally returns and removes the alien psychic presence, not knowing it is his son. With Gabriel barely hanging on, Charles doesn't notice the moment when Farooq slips into baby David's mind. Meanwhile, Switch collapses from the strain of traveling too much back in time. Time starts breaking because of Switch, and those in Division 3 experience it for themselves. Back in the house, Switch reveals the existence of creepy frame-skipping beings called time demons. With complete disregard for reality, they chew up time. Despite this danger, David obsessively wants Switch to try going back in time again. However, the time demons come for him, too. David suddenly ends up trapped in a prison where he talks to a memory of his mother, but he soon realizes the truth. This is the time demons' work. Meanwhile, the time demons are attacking everyone. Cary manages to pull Switch out just in time and reunites with the Division 3. Farooq, surprisingly helpful, joins the battle in a flipbook-style realm, but even he's outnumbered. Elsewhere, Syd does a painful heart-to-heart with her younger self, only to realize it is a time demon in disguise. As for Lenny, she ends up watching her lover give birth to their daughter. However, their daughter only lives an entire life in seconds and ends up turning into ashes before her eyes. Returning to David, he finally snaps and sets one of the time demons on fire. With the time demons forced to retreat, David unknowingly saves everyone. The crisis left deep damage, but worse, when David learns that Switch is taken, he declares war. With his power on full display, David ambushes Division 3's mobile unit to find Switch. After learning what he wants, David prepares for the war. However, Lenny remains desolate from gaining and losing her family in a span of seconds. Completely shattered, she decides to end it for good. Meanwhile, Switch sleeps in a tank in Cary's lab on the Division 3 airship. To escape David, they ascend into space, just beyond Earth's atmosphere. However, David still finds them and infiltrates the airship. He wipes out the guards and Clark, casually ejecting them into space. In David's search for Switch, he finds Syd. The two talk, but Syd suddenly body swaps with him. Now in David's body, Syd saves Cary, but before she can do more, Syd reaches David's mental space, where she meets numerous Davids. Announcing that he is Legion, the Davids grab Syd into their midst, making it impossible for her to return to her own body. When David finally finds Switch, Farooq holds him back and talks to him. However, Switch suddenly opens a portal and sends Farooq into the time between time. With a new plan, Switch and David enter the time portal. Before focusing on David again, let's visit a different astral plane. There, Oliver and Melanie are living a peaceful and occasionally eventful life because of Jerome Wolfe. One day, Oliver discovers a baby girl and they raise her. This girl is Syd Barrett. Building her a life of safety and reassurance, their life shifts from nursery rhyme cottages to foggy Victorian London. Syd grows up strong and resolute. As she learns what it means to save others, Melanie and Oliver say she's now ready to return. Syd soon wakes up on the airship, but her second upbringing somehow made her different. She immediately gets to work and recruits Cary and Cary's help to follow David into the timeline he's heading to. With the time eaters closing in, Syd, Cary, and Cary barely make it through the time portal before it closes behind them. We're back in the past, following Charles Xavier. And yes, it's that Charles. David's dad is Professor X. On Charles's trip to Morocco, he meets a younger Amahl Farouk, who has been expecting his arrival, even though they had never really met or talked before. Despite Farouk's gracious hospitality, it doesn't take long for Charles to feel something's off. More so when he gets to watch a short play glorifying the Shadow King. When David finally manages to appear before his father, he tells him everything about him being his son and how Farooq is the enemy. David even offers Charles a slice of cake that shows him his memories. Given how he unknowingly wrongs his son, Charles joins hands with David in his plan to end Farooq. However, time is now fragile. Switch collapses from the strain of going back in time numerous times. Meanwhile, Syd, Cary, and Cary make it to the same timeline, except they are where baby David is. With her newfound insight from her second time growing up, Syd decides to save baby David. Elsewhere, present-day Farooq finally escapes the time between time and reaches the same timeline. Determined, David and his father, Charles, prepare to take down Farooq, but when they get to him, there are two Farooqs now, one from the past and the other from the present. To deal with them, David takes on the past Farooq while Charles deals with the present Farooq. While David goes for an all-out brawl with the past Farooq, Charles and the present Farooq talk instead while sharing a drink. As the fight between David and the past Farooq continues, David gets bound by a straitjacket while his foe exploits his mental shackles. Unexpectedly, he manages to gather his power at the thought of his mother. Meanwhile, Switch is dying. Bravely facing her imminent death, she unexpectedly gets an awakening. Her father, unlike before, is now before her. He reveals that they are four-dimensional beings who can even make the guards of time, or what we know as time demons, follow. Happy with his child's growth, Switch's father wants to introduce her to existence, but Switch chooses to finish what she started first. Returning to the fight, Charles actually reaches an agreement with the present Farooq. So when David's about to end the past Farooq, his father intervenes. Charles privately talks with his son and gets to the core of the problem. David feels wronged for being left behind. Charles wants to be a father to him, and David finally experiences what it's like to have his real father's love. Elsewhere, Switch saves baby David and the others from the time demons. She discusses with Syd what will happen now and comforts her by saying the new Syd will be glorious. Meanwhile, the present Farooq shares his memories with the past Farooq. With opposing sides now reaching an understanding, David and Farooq finally shake hands. Seeing this, Switch also rejoins her father. With everything in order, Charles returns home and everyone gets a fresh start. Knowing they'll fade and forget all this in their new life, Syd and David watch baby David one last time. This artistic adaptation of Legion finally closes with baby David happy. While the story deviates from the original, this series leaves a great impression with its creativity alone. From kaleidoscopic, cinematic visuals to mind-blowing timelines, we just witnessed a collision of love, madness, and power. Now that the story's done, what do you think? With a completely accepting family, will David finally prove that he can be better in his new life? Let us know in the comments, and see you guys in our next video.